Today is Monday, March the 27th, 2023. The time is 4 o'clock p.m. We have one item on our agenda, and that is to update and discuss the downtown streetscape project. So Josh, I'll let Josh Morgan start, and then we'll let the city manager talk to us.
Okay, thank you all. On your table, you should have a kind of a letter from me that shows a streetscape construction update. And I tried to break that down in a way that was clear, that kind of shows each component, major components that are left on the project, and the schedule, the start date, end date for those, along with some phasing in the areas that I know of at this point. But the phasing may change. We'll try to keep you all updated on that. But kind of going down the list, the first thing is installing the curbs and preparing the paver bases. That work's been ongoing for a while now. Still anticipate having that work completed by May 1st. And I've shown the phasing there. They've started on the north side of Main between 2nd and 3rd, there in front of Chase Bank. Once they complete that side, they'll move to the south side of Main in that area. And then once they complete Main, they'll go to South 3rd. That's on both sides of the street down to the parking garage, about halfway. And then they'll move to the west side of North 4th Street after that. Construct intersections. That's the work kind of going on the northwest corner of 3rd right now, 3rd and Main right now. That's where they put the radius in around the intersections. That's probably been the most difficult work they've been working on lately. They're doing a little bit out of sequence of the last update we gave on the website. Just they're trying to get those done earlier. That work's still slated to try to get that done by May 1st. I think they'll go past that date a little bit, probably when they get off of those main second and third at Main intersections. If they have to do the radius there by the Arts Center, that'll probably be the last one they do. That may go a little past May 1st, but on the schedule right now, they're still looking towards that date. Installing pavers. The decorative paver subcontractor mobilized today. They were on site today, starting to prepare to put pavers down. So that work is starting now. I think it'll move quicker than what the other components are moving. So I think the work there just is dependent on them having space to put pavers down. I think they'll knock out the 2 blocks they have there between 3rd and 4th on Main pretty quickly over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then they'll just be looking for the next space that's available to them. But they have an anticipated completion date. Depends on if they can get all the paver base down and ready. They should have that done by June 1st at the latest. Lighting, street lighting. So we have a delivery date for our street lights right now of June 8th. So they won't be able to go up before the June 1st date. That's just the delivery date we've been given, and they're sticking to that pretty well. So I think that'll happen. So what we'll do is, you see out there now, you see they've poured a lot of the streetlight bases, and they have the little orange covers over the anchor bolts, and that's how those will set until time for those lights to go up. So we'll be able to finish the rest of the project and just have the light bases there ready for when the lights get here. That work should take about a month. So we're anticipating maybe July 1st. If we can get them by June 8th, we'll have the lights up by July 1st. Trees should be here in 3 weeks. Start putting those in. That should just take a week or two, depending on the weather, to get the trees installed. So May 1st is definitely a good date, completion day for that. Milling and paving, that really depends on when the project's ready for it. If they can get all the curbs in by the middle of May, they'll do that milling and paving the last half of May and have that completed by June 1st as well. And then install site furnishings. The furnishings are here and ready to go. And so that's just kind of the last item. Once the pavers get in and the site's ready, they'll start installing the furnishings. So we're looking through that to happen during the month of May if they can get the pavers down. And that one item that's still kind of up in there is the traffic signal mast arms. We do not have a delivery date on those yet. So we'll kind of do what we're doing with the street lights with that. We'll just prepare the site for them. When they get here, we'll put them up. That shouldn't impact kind of downtown. It should keep everything running pretty smooth until the point they get here. We'll be able to leave the signals and everything operate as normal until the point that they arrive and we can put them up. So that's kind of a rundown of the major items. Are there any questions on that?
Not specifically. When did we break ground?
We broke ground the first week of July.
1st of July. And at the time, we thought it would take about a year, right?
Yeah, we had this goal of trying to get as much of the sidewalks done as we could by by the holidays. And then the lead time on the curbs and the pavers just made that impossible. So we were trying to attempt at least get the sidewalks in front of the buildings done by then, and as much as we could once the curbs arrived. The curbs arrived late October, early November, so we could start putting in curbs at that point. And then we kind of shut down around Thanksgiving, not completely, but for the most part shut down through Christmas. And then January hit us pretty bad with the weather. So that pushed a little bit of that. But yeah, we always had a end of May 2023 completion date on the contract, because we kind of knew we were hoping we would have the lighting in time where that would happen, but we knew some of the stuff would linger, especially the overhead utility burial. We knew that was definitely going to linger into the spring, no matter what. So, yeah, we're still close. We're fairly close to the initial contract date. I think some of we were trying to get the work done in front of the Main Street businesses faster than what has happened. But I think this was just the nature of lead times on materials, and also trying to get their doors open as quick as we could, which I think we did a really good job at. But that also made it where we actually had probably 3 laps around Main Street, right? We went through with sidewalks, and we went through with curbs, and now we're going through with pavers, and we went through with drainage at one point. So we've kind of, instead of just being extremely disruptive one time, we've been somewhat disruptive 4 times. But I don't, we've talked a lot about it internally. I don't know if there was unless we had just ordered all materials a year ahead of time and waited till they all got here, I don't know if there would be a different way we could have done it than what we've done.
Let me say this on the sheet that I was going to provide, and I'll touch on it now real quick. The lack of, quote, oversight by the city, and Stephen, feel free to interrupt. Contract law is an art. It is not something the city, just because it has a contract with the contractor, the city does not have the legal right to go out there and tell them what to do. Once you release the project to them, it is their project to be constructed consistent with the contract documents. And so the means and methods, and in that sense, in many cases, the order is up to the contractor. When the project specifications are developed, we do as much as we can to manage the schedule and control the order of work. At the water plant, we actually had it broken out into large phases. In this project, Josh had organized it in each block, but when the contractor bid the job, remember vaguely, they came back and said they proposed an alternative, which was to develop the sidewalk end of project to end of project against the building first. And their suggestion is once you do that, then our work is in front of the building, but there's no access is maximized considering their construction. And it's never totally cut off then, once you put that sidewalk in against the building. And when we did that, and so then we heard that, and once we authorized that, the means and method beyond that authorization is really we have no control over that then at that point. But so when Josh originally was going to meetings and talking about how it was going to progress schedule-wise, the contractor proposed an alternative which seemed more reasonable. And frankly, when we got that first step done, it was met with extremely positive feedback on the street. Folks saw that and said, well, we can get around downtown. We know they're working, but we can get around. So that was generally met with very positive feedback. So we felt like that was a win. But once that was done, it didn't align with the things that engineering had originally indicated to expect when the project would be built prior to bidding. Mm-hmm. Okay? So understanding that, and then understanding that it is a legal relationship, and we are limited on what restrictions we put in those specs, strictly because when we add a restriction, we increase cost. So there's a balance between cost and control that we exercise, right? And every project, you have to judge that, and you do the best you can, and you know, within reason. And then, but once the project is bid, it is purely a legal relationship. It's a contract, and they are performing a contract. They either meet the outcome of that contract, which is a finished sidewalk, finished installed pavers, curbs installed, electrical work installed. And so really, that's the limit of what control you actually have then. And so it's not a lack of oversight. Now, we monitor things like progress to make sure we don't get upside down on payment. There's a balance with all those different aspects. But there's no unless you're doing like a construction management style contract, the city doesn't have any control over means and method. And most general citizens don't understand that.
Well,
And, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to gather all the dates in my head, really. So if we had just torn it all out at the beginning and then put it all back, how long would that have taken? Would that decrease the time, total time? And if so, how much? And
Well, I
would it have
think-
taken us through Christmas, I'm assuming?
I think based on, when we decided to kind of move forward with the project, we would be doing that this summer. We
Okay.
would still be, we would be looking at demoing after a brass band this year, because we would have had to wait till all those materials came in before we ever could have tried that.
And then
we-
once
you
they
know,
came in, you wouldn't have had time to get it done.
Right.
So you probably would
That's
have
it.
delayed construction until after your brass band.
And I've even thought about that concept of like, would that have been better?
Yeah.
You're still going to have to take the time. Like right now, it's really, I think they're having to take a lot of time putting in these curbs, or especially around these turning radiuses in the intersections, and getting the drainage just right. Main Street's very flat, which actually makes the drainage really difficult because the tolerances are really low on where that drainage is going. So they're having to, and that would have to happen either way. They would still be taking the time and shooting grade, trying to put the puzzle together, even if we'd had the materials here and just try to do if we'd just torn up one area at a time. Now, I do think there's a concept where you close one section of Main Street. We talked about that before we even bid the project. There was a version of this where we close Main between Second and Third and just do the whole block. You let the contractor have the whole street. But we even thought then, that's probably 2 months that street's probably closed to do that. And we kind of decided that was too disruptive to traffic.
That would have eliminated access entirely.
Well, you maybe
that
could have
is-
kept your sidewalks, you could have maybe had rough pedestrian access to the front doors to businesses, but yeah, no vehicular access. And it still would not have been attractive. It's the same thing we're battling now. We have front door access, but the perception that Main Street's a mess and I can't drive downtown, I can't park downtown is what's driving a lot of this discussion. So I think even then, you're dealing with the same thing. It's maybe a shorter time frame, but it's a lot larger disruption. And even then, if you run into issues, if you run into a material you can't get in time, if you run into something they find underground they weren't prepared for, you've pushed that 2 months to 2.5, 3 months. And then that's now when we run into something where we're disrupting such a small area at a time, when we run into issues, we just kind of leapfrog that and go somewhere else until we're able to come back. And it's not a huge disruption because we're saying such a small footprint. We're trying to. So I think it's been beneficial. There's pluses and minuses both ways. I've actually run that through my head quite a bit. I'll never do another project like this again. I was saying, we've kind of picked the hardest one to try to knock out here. I mean, we'll never do anything this difficult again. So
I'm sure you chased your own tail. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't do any good. I think we made the best decision based on the information we had at the time.
Your question reminds me, it's kind of parallel to when the city moved the pump station at the end of Graybrook Street to off of Goggin. There were several issues presented for that project. It was a long piece of pipe that had to be laid, and there was only one property owner disturbed, being the Danville Country Club. And they elected to have it done fairway. I can't remember the exact number of fairways, but they only wanted one interrupted at a time. So the city did it in accordance with that. The side effect was the project took probably 3 times as long total, as opposed to just ripping it up. But the golf course would have been closed for that amount of time. So they elected to have instead of having total closure, just have limited play on one hole at a time until the whole project was completed. And so it's interesting that was there, and the city was going to do whatever they decided to do at that time. Now, if you ask them if they were pleased with that or not, I don't know. I think the city's viewpoint will always be to provide some access, even if it's not perfect, because the standard under the law is to provide reasonable access as quickly as possible. And so, which helped define the approach here and the response. Because really, when you define a public good under the law, the standard that a city or any governmental unit must comply with, to be honest, is relatively low. It's that when you have a defined public good, we've established that, sidewalks, roadways, waterways, pipe, whatever, then you just have to provide reasonable access during the time of construction. So in this case, as far as meeting the legal standard, albeit low, it was met by the approach that was taken by the city. But there's no perfect approach to any project. It's just 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But the approach, if you closed it, would have been maximum disruption, potentially for a shorter amount of time, or not, based upon availability of materials.
Once the sidewalk against the building, block to block, once that idea came to fruition, we got a lot of positive feedback on that. When in the fall, whenever the Thanksgiving season rolled around, we, in essence, shut the project down for about 4 or 5 weeks at the request of downtown businesses. If you recall, we had dialogue when the grant was ongoing at the time. We had indicated that we would try to remove construction activities from the prime shopping season. And so that was a delay, and that was one that the city consciously did in response to requests from the businesses. With that delay, really, I think, has contributed to the lagging on effect. And, at the time, we didn't really think of that, probably. And so you've got an extra, then you had some winter weather. December was good weather for this project. And then you've had some poor weather since then. So you've got a little bit of the double delay in a sense, because you got bad weather that, kind of drug production out a little bit. And then you had just this intentional pause or slow down so that Christmas could happen. And so those things have caused the project to drag on, seemingly, right? Seemingly drug on. But it's really only been 3 months since Christmas, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I should say this or not. I mean, out of all the projects we have going right now, the downtown project's going the best. Like, I've probably had my eye on it more. I talk to them almost every day, so I'm a little more involved. But all the projects we have going on, it's been fairly seamless as far as a construction project goes. We haven't had a lot of huge delays. We have some materials we're still trying to work on, where the electrical and lighting and signals, but from a construction standpoint, it's gone pretty well.
A lot of the buildings, your building interaction with the sidewalk, usually that is conflicted and has a lot of, and that went really smooth. Not a lot of delay there, not a lot of discussion there, trying to resolve grade issues and all these slope issues and things like that. That really didn't, which was probably because Main Street's so flat. But we really didn't see any of that either.
And like we said, I think when pavers start going down this week, if the weather stays good, and over the next 2 weeks we get the pavers done on both sides of Main between 3rd and 4th, I think that's really going to change the feel, because we'll be able to take a lot of the cones and barrels and everything off of those 2 blocks and make those look more finished. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're hoping the whole feeling changes a lot. But we're still going to be digging out the corners on 3rd and Main, which are going to make those turns a little slower for folks, and they'll have to take their time a little more through downtown. But
And we've not seen periods where there's not been a lot of production. So like, we have been cognizant to walk the street on a regular basis, end to end. Josh has gone with me some. And rarely have I gone that I've not seen significant change every time. That's not always apparent because sometimes they're burying utilities, sometimes they're doing these things that, you know, you may not pick up on unless you're looking for what work they're to be doing. But there's not been, other than the Christmas break, where progress was intentionally slowed because we didn't want a bunch of workers downtown. They were able to demonstrate progress every time you went through.
Also, you know, somebody else.
When you first started the project, I just wondered, I know it. Did you, I mean, you met with the businesses, did you give them a timeline of this is when we think it'll be finished?
Yeah, we always tried to we tried to communicate what we thought the timeline would be. And then once we had the contractor on board, we tried to adjust that and tell people, okay, since we know, you know, pavers aren't going to come into this date and curbs aren't, this is how the schedule is going to change and this is what it's going to look like. I think, you know, I'm always probably a little too optimistic about how things are going to go. I thought we'd be a little bit further along at this point, but that doesn't, you know, like I said, I don't think there's much we could have done to be much further along than we are now actually seeing the project happen. So, yeah, I think we tried to communicate that. We did a lot of communication ahead of time, though, and we didn't do as much once the contractor got here. Now, looking back, maybe we should have done a little bit more, but then we were also just hitting the ground running. You know, we had them here. We're just trying to get things going as fast as we can. We probably didn't do as much outreach at that point.
But, I mean, there wasn't
My outreach was more, I had less meetings and more just me walking down the street and talking to people in that way. And sometimes it's the best way, but also you might miss some people that you needed to hit otherwise. So, yeah, I think we.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the job too, the Heart of Danville, Mary took the lead on communication. And we had two-prong approach. Staff was doing direct contacts, and then Mary was handling the mass communication. So all of downtown was getting an update through that organization. Once that went away, we ended up not really replacing it, and that's probably a mistake by us. But we did do that on occasion, but not at the same rate. But what we were doing is we replaced that with individual contact. So in other words, we didn't fool with the south side of Main, east of 3rd, because the contractor was in front of Wisiger Park, right? So they wouldn't have gotten any contact from us that week. Right, but maybe on the opposite side, when they were on the south side of Main in that block, we'd have been talking to the business owners in that area, the bank or you know, whoever, the church or whichever one it was, on an individual basis, walking through the street if they ask, and then not heard anything from the north side where Dry Stack is. Right, we wouldn't even have been talking to them that week. So, but again, that mass communication, then there was gaps in time where the folks that say at Dry Stack didn't hear from us. And so we probably should have continued that mass email process. But when she left, that stopped, and we probably didn't realize that at first. That was a breakdown on consistent communication.
I was just, were they thinking, or were they told it was going to be finished in January? Or, I mean, when did they realistically thought, at the beginning of the project, when did people think it would be done?
I mean, we were trying to push that idea. We would try to get as much of the sidewalks done as we could by Christmas.
Oh,
and
okay.
we even by Thanksgiving, really, because we were going to shut down for that month. And we even were still trying to do that once they got on board. But we did tell people, hey, you know, considering when the pavers and curbs are going to get here, probably some of that's going to linger into the spring. Like I said, it's probably lingered more than we initially thought, but I don't think we ever, you know, I think we always thought that the parking and all that would be a little more disrupted, even up into the, and we also, we were looking at, and this is an error on my part too, not an error, I don't know. January, February is not the busiest time for people to be downtown. I mean, but we do have certain businesses that rely on January and February. And we talked to them about that. We've talked to them about that throughout the entire project. And that's something that maybe we leaned on that a little too much. Maybe we should have, hey, given January, February the same priority we gave every other month. But it's hard. I mean, it's like right now, we are pretty spread out. Like, we're not on one area. They're working in multiple blocks at the same time. And I'm trying to think, we're working to try to figure out how to lessen that. But also at the same time, we want to get this thing done by June. We want to we've got to keep pushing things forward as best we can. So it's really more of a focus on, hey, let's get these pavers down. Let's get out of the parking spaces where we get pavers down, and then we can focus on other areas. And that, because I think, it's kind of the parking is the thing that really gets talked about a lot when I'm downtown. It's less about sidewalks and more about parking spaces.
I was going to ask you, what's the net loss of spaces?
Beginning of the project, it was 9. We've been plus or minus a little bit since then. I think we may be up to around 11 or something like that, because we've added and taken away. I think it depends on what we do on 4th Street, South 4th, with the traffic through there and the parking spaces through there. I think we're around 11. And parking's a whole nother, we probably need to have a whole meeting to talk about parking, especially with coming out of Streetscape, what that looks like downtown. Because this has been a good kind of experiment for us to see how people react to different changes. We've added some public parking in the surface lots. We've made the parking garage free for 2 hours, and we have data on that now, how that's impacting people's behavior. So that can kind of guide us as we start talking about parking. People aren't using the parking garage any more than they were beforehand, which is surprising to me. I thought with us making it free for 2 hours, we'd see a tick up in use, and it hasn't happened. So that kind of shows, behaviorally how people are going to react to different things. So that's kind of the next step, I think, for us as a group, is to figure out what parking looks like. Because
I'd like to make one comment, and that is that you've given us a very comprehensive update today, and at the conclusion of this meeting sometime this week, we need to have these dates, if they're realistic dates, and this information that you all are sharing with us, given out to all the downtown folks that are impacted by this. And as I read it, there are several major things you're saying are going to be finished by the 1st of May. And then there's another set that are going to be finished by the 1st of June. And then July the 1st will all be done except for the traffic signals. That's impressive. Still a little bit of time to go, but at least giving an update about these items will be completed by this date will be, I think, welcomed by lots of folks who are business owners on Main Street. And then this last thing about the parking spaces, that's definitely going to be something we need to look at, because if it's 11, I started out thinking it was just going to be a net loss of 4 or 5 spaces. And that may have been just on Main Street. 11, like you say, may include 4th Street now, so that might be the difference. But it's important to get that information out. You two guys over here have some comments or questions? Because Earl's got some report he's going to do to us as well.
And how many surface lot spots did we add? I think I counted 12.
Are there
But
12?
I don't know.
We
One
add them
fell
as
down.
people's in leases. I'm not sure what the latest number was. I was thinking, we started out with 6, I believe, and I think we've added some since then, so we
Yeah, there
keep
was
adding.
5, and then there was 8. That'd be 13. And then one sign was gone, so that's important to keep promoting. And a lot of times, they're full. Because I come downtown at least 3 times a week, and people are using those. So I hope we can keep that up, because that would solve the problem. Just marketing and messaging, just get out, like the mayor said, and get all this message. We're in the final stretch. I think that's encouraging, and if people know the plan, a lot of times they're encouraged. They'll see what happens each week. They'll get excited. There's a lot of people excited, and just focus on staying on track and messaging. So thank you.
Brother Commissioner Series, any comments?
My only comment is I think you're doing the best you can, and so is the construction group. Most of the feedback I get is positive, just patience.
I know this is somewhat of a personal narrative and not in my professional capacity here today, but as a owner of a downtown business, I'm sympathetic with the impact being disturbed. It's a disturbance. However, while not in the retail or restaurant worlds, our clients have gotten to us. And it may have been through a zigzag path that they've never done before, but the people that have needed to get there have gotten there. Someone in an unconventional approach. I mean, we ourselves hadn't had our driveway to our parking lot for some amount of time. And while there are access issues, particularly for some, I will say that the pain associated with a project like this is borne mostly by those that own property downtown, but we also have the most to gain from it at the end. So when it's completed, my business, those around us, will be not only more attractive, but probably more valuable because of the aesthetics that are going to be around it. So on days where it has been a little bit more frustrating, the mindset and the optimism that we have is that, listen, at the end of the day, our property is going to be greatly improved, our access is going to be much better, and it's going to be a more walkable, safer place to be. And so sometimes the pain is worth it. And I say pain loosely because we've not had access and we've not had revenue issues as our retail and other restaurant people downtown have, but we have had access issues. But we've worked through it, and we know it's going to be worth it in the end. So at least, and I know from the professional standpoint, the professional clients or business owners downtown, and I mean that from the services that we offer, service-oriented industries, I think are relatively encouraged, and you just bear it and move on. But I say that in sympathy because we have not had the revenue component of it that other people that have to sell things. We sell services, but we're not selling, a product. But I think that's a perspective too, because when we talk about downtown business owners, the category of the service that you represent matters. And your service-oriented industries, I would say, probably haven't suffered that much, if at all.
Mr. Coffey, you want to give us your report, then we'll go back and open up again for other questions and discussions.
Well, we'll repeat all of this for the most part. Some of it you all have already talked about with Josh. We'll be shorter on those points. We met, the mayor and I and Commissioner Caudill met with some of the business owners on March 23rd. Primarily the owners were located between 3rd and 4th on the north side of Main. There was about 10 citizens present. Some of the points they included was just, in general, the reduced business activity during construction. The schedule was shifting. They didn't understand it. Communication has been lacking, or there's been miscommunication. They have had limited updates, they felt like. There was a lack of project oversight by the city. And then the city did not take advantage of the Streetscape Committee. We hadn't had any regular meeting in the Streetscape Committee to improve communication. Then when we asked them what the proposed solutions were, they wanted staff to report to the commission and have open discussion, which we're doing now. And we'll continue to do that at regular meetings as we've done. There was a request to develop a program to offset any financial impact, which was ambiguous. They wanted us to improve communication, keep things up to date, that we did communicate so that it was current information, not dated. And then to quote, make sure we have at least one side open for parking on the street, Main Street at a time. Remove construction equipment on the weekends to staging areas, seemed like a good recommendation. Then to provide tax credits or grants for the downtown restaurants was a request. And then they wanted us to push for schedule compliance. So in response to all those things, first, we identify a tax offset, incentive, or credit is simply not permitted under the law. The city can't waive their taxes, can't rebate their taxes, can't diminish their tax without structurally changing our tax code constitutionally. So we have to lower the tax rate overall. You can't have, as a local community, just a discriminate application of the taxes, right? So that's just not an option under the law.
I think it's important to note that that's not coming from Stephen, it's coming from KLC.
Well, and we confirm that with KLC,
Yeah.
right? And it's clearly stated in the legal handbook, like that's constitutional in Kentucky, that's the case. We'll skip over the grant offering at first, but when they said develop a program to do a financial impact, the city did do a grant offering up to $10,000, which was unprecedented. We had never done that before on any construction project in this community. Most communities try to make an extraordinary effort to maintain access to the business, but very few actually are in a position to offer a grant or something that is tied to a public purpose. So it can't just be for that business that is impacted. I guess I will dive into it a little bit. It can't just be for the business that is impacted by construction. It has to be for a public purpose. So if you're going to have a grant program, what is the public purpose of offering a grant program to downtown businesses? At first, it seemed logical because we felt like the community would benefit from a revitalized streetscape downtown. And then because that revitalization was occurring during the peak holiday season for some of your retail businesses, the grant program seemed to align with the Christmas season and seemed to make sense, right? But that the public purpose is because they were suffering during their peak season for the greater good, right? And so we've done that. Like now, we also, at the request of some of the businesses, indicated that this was a step one, and that we would come back and revisit the subject at the end of February. We're doing that now, and we've done that. I guess we'll conclude the discussion with that recommendation here in a minute. The next step, the engineering and the community liaison have had, and I explained this for a minute, direct communication. We will need to add back written updates and written communications more broadly to everyone at the same time so that everybody will get the same information at the same time. And like I said, when Mary left, we probably didn't do that efficiently like we had been. The construction schedule, Josh has given it to you. The biggest delays, like he's saying, is your vertical things, your metal, your lighting, that kind of thing. All parking has been open, and we've done things like Commissioner Holland alluded to. We've added parking, we've added customer parking, we've signed the entire Main Street for customer parking only. Both sides generally have been open other than the area where the contractor was actually working. So we didn't close necessarily both sides of the street at the same time. We've had a truck parked on one side doing something specific, but the rest of the parking on that block was open. So we've not necessarily had mass closings of all the parking on both sides of the road. We've not done that necessarily. And again, we've added the customer parking to the 2nd and 3rd Street parking lots. We added 2-hour free parking to the garage in an effort to offset some of those other demands. Some equipment was left in downtown on the weekends and off hours to protect a car from going in a hole, things like that, much like you see plates over a driving lane. Equipment that can be moved generally has been moved. In a utility cut, we've left the excavator has been in line and left there a lot of times because that's the end of a hole. That's the end of a work trench. We can ask them to continue to do that, to move equipment from staging, but generally speaking, they do that already. And then we did require the contractor to take steps necessary to keep businesses open, to maintain their access. And the contractor's solution to that, rather than building temporary sidewalks out of wood totally, was to build the sidewalk against the building end of the job, so that you would have 2 or 3 crossings of the work zone into it that were short, maybe 4 to 6 feet. That seemed to meet expectations until it began to lag on here in the last few weeks. All right. So going back to the grant offering, I don't know what your all's temperature is, but as we reached out to different cities, there's not a lot of examples of grants being offered just because you have a construction project in the area of the business. We did one. The examples that we had, and, for example, Richmond had a project where they did one, and it was a project that started from point A to point B, then ended. 3 or 4 months later, there was a problem on the project. The contractor had to remobilize, close the street back down totally. In that second project, come back and redo, the city then stepped up and said, well, this was unprecedented, the idea of coming back and tearing it up after you just finished it. And so they did offer, and they created a $50,000 pot that businesses could apply for. They maxed out each one at $5,000. The city's pot that it created was $220,000. And it, I don't know that we've got 100% consumption of that yet. I think, 2 out of 200 say we're 9,200 has been consumed.
It was 225,
Yep.
and we have only issued out 165 as of the bill list tonight, and we only have 2 pending applications, I believe, that we're waiting on them still to provide the required financial documents. So even if they both request and receive the maximum 10,000, we still won't have allocated all of the amount we set aside.
So with that, I don't know that we could, we looked at pretty much cities in Kentucky. We ran it through the listserv, and there's only literally 3 or 4 cities that's ever done it, that responded. Say it like that we were able to discover. There's a couple others, but they were all tied to specific events, most of them related to COVID. But it's really, I think in good faith, you've done a lot by offering the first round. And I think at the end of the day, it's very difficult to recommend from our position. Businesses on the bypass would have the right to say it's a redistribution of our taxes into downtown, and that's not necessarily appropriate. They could argue, and then the argument then becomes, well, are you granting our business every time you have a water line issue in front of my business? And certainly that's not the standard, and just it starts to reach a point where that's probably not what you should do.
How many people were eligible for the grant? It was retail and restaurants, right?
It was retail, restaurants, essentially everybody except financial and professional services, such as banking institutions. There were quite a few. I'm not 100% sure. We have to double check with Melanie. We mapped out downtown and counted up the eligible businesses and gave ourselves a little wiggle room. And essentially, so there are some people that were eligible that have not applied, presumably because they did not feel a financial burden.
I guess what I was getting at, I didn't know how many people were eligible for it, because it seems like we're going to have $40,000 we allocated that it's not earmarked just yet. Could we put that out there and just use that as, that's it?
I
would say you're going to end up
Yeah.
at about 25 to 30. Yeah.
I mean, there's possible we get a few more applications in and use up the rest. I think Melanie hand-delivered the application to most people. So most of them, I think, are aware, but that's my perception.
Was there a deadline to apply?
We did institute a deadline to apply. We let them know that ahead of time. We have recently gotten an application in after the fact, within the last week and a half or so, and we hadn't had any calls or requests in, we did it as January 31st. We hadn't had any questions or applications in February or March until this most recent one. And Earl and I talked about it, and we decided to proceed with the application as soon as they get their documents in. We essentially, he had stated he didn't apply at first because his business wasn't impacted during December and January, but the movement of it has since. So we allowed that application to proceed through.
So what was the deadline?
January 31st. So, I mean, I think at this point, we're still, can say we are still accepting them since we made a precedent of accepting this last one, but we haven't had any question, or I haven't had any, my department, any questions about new applications so far.
Well, if we just have 2 more, that's 185, and that would still leave, I would cut it off, and and then we could decide what to do with 40. If,
That's.
I don't know.
Yeah,
What do
that's a
you all think?
decision you guys we can, we did get we have 2, like I said, 2 that are pending, which I believe includes the one we just recently got. And we can let them know that you all will make a further recommendation about the remainder.
well, I just feel like the greatest gift would be staying on schedule and just keeping the focus and enhancing communication. I think that would say volumes. Every complaint I've gotten, I've passed along or encouraged them to talk to Earl, and it's been handled, so thank you.
One of the things you could do is now that, we know where we're at today, we could come back in 2 weeks and at the next regular meeting, April the 10th, we could have it as an agenda item and let you all discuss kind of what your positions are at that time. I mean, you could wait just 2 more weeks and reconsider kind of where you're at if you wanted to.
I mean, I personally would like to have an update on every meeting. Just, just an update of, hey, we're on schedule, just for everybody to know, because I've been downtown walking in businesses, and there's a lot of positives. People are happy about it. Some people are not, but for the majority, they've been very complimentary of the people working on the streets. They've been very helpful. They just want to see it finished. They're just like, we're trying to tough through this and make it. So there's been a lot of positives,
So if you came up with 225,000 at the starting point, and say we've used 185,000 of that, that's probably an 85 to 90% participation rate of those who are eligible. That's pretty good. Those who were eligible who didn't apply, 31st of January was passed, I assume they have decided they're not going to apply. And to those 3 or 4 who are concerned about us doing something differently, I think all this information needs to be assimilated to them as soon as possible. And I'm okay with the city manager's request to think about 2 weeks from now looking at the 40,000. I guess my question would be, if we're going to look at 40,000, is there a way to add something additionally to the 40,000, and it be still a part of the same grant program? It may not be legal, but to toss out $40,000 to folks, unless you say it's just for those who didn't apply in the first round. But if you say it's for those who applied in the first round, then that's really not going to go very far to do hardly anything, just $40,000. So either we add something additionally to it if that's legal, or we say the program's over with, and that's all we feel comfortable in doing. This was all ARPA money, right?
No. That has become very confused by a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And I can send you guys the memo I sent the first round. It is not ARPA money. We have used ARPA money to pay for general services for things like police and fire safety salaries, to free up general fund monies. So it is taxpayer dollars that are being allocated out. That's the long and short of it. ARPA money is not eligible for downtown streetscapes.
I'm glad
No,
you
no.
said that. I've had that argument with some
Yeah.
To clarify
So
that, we were nuancing the use of those dollars.
It's very specific what you can use ARPA. Like there's flexibility with ARPA, but that is not one of them.
Let me ask my question again then.
Yes.
You said streetscape money, I mean, streetscape projects are not eligible for ARPA funds. I'm strictly talking about the grant program, the money for the
Nope,
grant
that,
program. That's not,
neither one.
that's not grant, that's not
That is
ARPA
not
money.
ARPA eligible.
But
so
ARPA freed up the money. in the
ARPA
grant.
allowed us to free up general fund money.
Okay, well, we've all been a little confused.
Josh has something he's dying to say.
I think the finish line is near, and Josh is, we can see it. We can see the finish line. Josh's timeline is very helpful. I think if we had a deadline on applying for funds, we hit the deadline. You're getting a little too close now. It's almost like, oh, gosh, I should have put some money in my pocket, but
Josh, I had another question, not about funding, but about the pavers. Could you explain that process to us?
The pavers?
Yes, sir, how that's going to be done and what's going to look,
Yeah, they had to wait till the asphalt plant's open to put down, they put a bituminous layer, it's asphalt layer that is above the concrete you see now, and they'll place the pavers into that. It's just a little softer base for the pavers to go into, so they'll settle a little better. So you'll see that go down first and then the pavers. But it'll be a very, very quick process getting the pavers put in. So they'll just work down the street. Come in, I think they're going to start at 3rd and work their way down to 4th on both sides.
and the size of the pavers?
Oh, they vary in size, but they're larger than a brick. They're more in the 8 by 16 size, those kind of, that range. But there's different sizes. It'll kind of piece together like a puzzle.
About the size of your laptop down to the size of a book.
And the color?
There's grays. There's I think 3 different gray colors that we picked to kind of, and they'll make a pattern out of it. So
It'll look good.
If I can say one more thing too, I want to temper expectations somewhat about if this additional money that may be not claimed through the grant program. It would be highly uncustomary to reallocate those funds to existing applicants or things of that nature. That in and of itself would require a new grant program, and which I don't think is the recommendation of staff at this point. But like most grants, you set the program and that cities applied for these, and then if there's money left over, it's not used, it simply rolls over into the next year into some other public purpose, but you don't redistribute what was unclaimed to those that got it previously. So I would say there would be a lot of hurdles and pitfalls that it could not, if you just were entertaining something like that. So I say that as we're all thinking about potential things to do with unclaimed funds in the year, what is most standard is that those funds simply go back to your general fund and would be allocated through your next budget process, which is right upon you. It would be uncustomary and unprecedented to reallocate those funds to existing applicants that were granted previous awards.
And as the city manager stated, that was very generous, the first round comparatively.
Other places, yeah. So if we've asked the staff for a recommendation, right now the recommendation would be to let the, what would be the recommendation?
I think my recommendation is just to give it a couple weeks and come back and, you know, look at your project, look at your update and see where you're sitting. That's what I would recommend.
And you'll bring us an update, a recommendation on the grant proposal, the deadline of the grant proposal. Those 2 additional people that have applied.
We will have those processed by the 10th, I would say. So we'll be able to have final numbers on that program. And as Councilor Dexter suggested,
Please say no.
I'm so sorry. The most recent one possibly we will get processed within a couple weeks because they were very responsive to the documents that we needed. Like, for instance, we have to check with the county that they are up to date on their taxes and their property taxes. If they own property for that downtown business, we obviously are not going to provide the funds to pay the back taxes on it, right? So we have to check that they're current on all their taxes. So we're waiting to hear back on that one, but the other one that is still pending, we've reached out multiple times and they have not got back to us. So we didn't officially set a close date. We probably need to do that in the future. If you haven't submitted all your documents by such date, then we won't process your application further. So I just wanted to be that clear. I would not presume that they will be completed soon.
Yeah, that's a great, the caveat is that they actually do their part and that
That's
they're
okay.
compliant.
That's fair enough,
so.
yeah. But I think April the 10th, we're going to be in a position to make a final decision on all this discussion.
Yeah,
And you might still have a grant pending, but that's okay, though.
yeah.
Good. Other questions or comments?
I appreciate the info. and,
Yes, yes.
I learned some stuff that I'd forgotten, so.
Did Josh
always
already
good.
go downtown and start spreading the word?
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be the countdown,
Yeah.
the countdown to Streetscape.
Appreciate Stephen earning his
Thank you.
$15 an hour today.
He's just getting started. Okay, so our next meeting is at 5:30. Commissioners, you're not allowed to leave the
Oh,
building.
let me say one more thing real quick, if I may, before you close. The idea of a loan program, the city can't loan its credit, meaning you can't create an internal loan program necessarily. So I just want to be clear about that part of it.
But
The
that is something that SBA
SBA,
does.
through the chamber and the SBA, I would seek relief there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. This has been very helpful. We have a plan. So Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn the special call meeting.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.